Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to our latest stories. Before I start, tell me where you are watching me from. I wonder which cities and towns will join me in this memory that will follow me for years. It all began on an ordinary Saturday afternoon, the kind of afternoon where the sunlight pours lazily through the windows, painting the walls in soft, golden patterns. I had just finished tidying my living room, the quiet rhythm of arranging books and folding blankets giving me a strange sense of satisfaction. That's when the knock came. I wasn't expecting anyone. My friends usually called ahead, and yet, there he was, my friend's boyfriend, standing on my porch, looking slightly awkward, like a man who wasn't quite sure if he belonged. He had that way about him, the kind of presence that fills a room without demanding attention. His eyes caught mine immediately, and for a moment, the world outside that little doorway seemed to pause. I invited him in, and we stepped into the living room, where the warm light made the colors of my furniture glow softly. The smell of freshly brewed coffee lingered in the air. I offered him a cup, and he accepted, his hands brushing mine briefly as he did. There was a spark of familiarity in that small touch, nothing overt, just human connection. We talked for a while about trivial things, the weather, local news, and how my friend had been busy with work, but there was an underlying tension in the air, an unspoken curiosity that neither of us acknowledged openly. At one point, he leaned back in the chair across from me, and I realized I had never truly looked at him. Not really. Not the way one looks at someone to understand them. His eyes were a shade of blue that seemed to shift with the light, sometimes calm, sometimes stormy, holding a depth that invited questions. Then, without warning, he spoke. His voice was soft but deliberate, carrying a weight I wasn't prepared for. "You have a way of seeing people," he said, his gaze fixed on mine. "It's different. Honest." I froze. There was no judgment in his tone, no criticism, only an acknowledgement that felt almost like a confession. The air between us seemed to thicken, charged with something I couldn't name. I wanted to respond, to say something witty or clever, but the words stumbled and fell away. I could only nod, unsure if I understood him or if he understood me. We sat in silence for a while after that. The room felt smaller, the sounds outside, the distant hum of traffic, the chirping of birds, faded into the background. It was as though the space between us had contracted into something more intimate, more revealing. I noticed little things about him, the way his fingers traced the rim of his coffee cup, the slight furrow in his brow when he was thinking, the quiet steadiness in his posture. There was trust there, too, a willingness to show a side of himself that most people never saw. At some point, our conversation drifted to memories, childhood stories, awkward teenage years, the kind of mishaps that make people laugh and feel less alone. He laughed at my stories, a deep, unrestrained laugh that made my own chest feel lighter. And in those moments, I realized that this encounter was not about attraction or drama, it was about human connection, the rare kind that sneaks up on you when you least expect it. It was about seeing someone as they truly were and being seen in return. By the time he left, the sky had shifted into a gentle evening, the sunlight softening into a lavender hue. We stood at the doorway, and he looked at me again, that same unwavering gaze. "Thank you," he said simply, "for letting me see." And just like that, he was gone, leaving me in the quiet aftermath of a conversation that had changed something within me. I closed the door slowly and leaned against it, taking a deep breath. There was a strange kind of joy in that fleeting connection, a reminder that life could surprise you in the most ordinary of settings. I found myself thinking about it long after, replaying the conversation, the way he looked at me, the unspoken understanding we had shared. And I knew, somehow, that this wasn't just a moment, it was a memory that would linger, shaping the way I saw the world and the people in it. The day faded into evening, and I sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker on, one by one. A quiet smile played on my lips as I sipped the coffee he had left behind. It was more than coffee, I realized. It was a reminder of connection, of the subtle, profound moments that make life feel rich and full. That afternoon had been simple, ordinary even, and yet it carried an intensity one hadn't expected. It reminded me that sometimes, the people you least anticipate meeting, the moments you never plan for, can leave the deepest imprint on your heart. After that afternoon, I couldn't quite shake the memory of his words, or the way his eyes had met mine with such quiet intensity. Days passed, and life went on in its usual rhythm: errands, phone calls, meals, and the comforting hum of routine, but there was a subtle undercurrent in everything I did, a trace of that encounter lingering in my thoughts like a soft echo. It was a Wednesday when I saw him again, though not by chance this time. My friend had invited both of us to her small book club gathering at a local cafe, a cozy place with worn leather chairs and shelves of books that smelled faintly of old paper and coffee. The smell alone always made me feel calm, and that evening, it seemed to deepen every sensation, every thought. I arrived early, giving myself a moment to settle in, sip my tea, and watch the sunlight filter through the windows. He arrived not long after, and there it was again, the way he carried himself, the subtle confidence mixed with a kind of approachable warmth. He spotted me immediately and offered a small smile, the kind that made it feel like we were the only two people in the room, even as others came and went. We exchanged greetings, light and casual, but underneath, there was a current of understanding that didn't need words. As the group gathered around, conversation flowed: books, local news, and small debates about characters and plots, but I found myself stealing glances at him whenever I could. There was something in the way he listened, really listened, that made me notice things I often overlooked. He didn't just hear words, he absorbed them, reflected on them, and made you feel seen. And when he looked at me, there was a subtle recognition, as if he knew the corner of my thoughts I didn't even share aloud. Later, as the cafe began to empty and the group's discussion wound down, he and I ended up lingering, clearing cups and arranging chairs while the rest of the members chatted in small clusters. That's when he turned to me, eyes catching the dim light in a way that made everything else blur. "You have a calm that people notice," he said quietly. "Not loud or flashy, just steady. It's rare." I felt a warmth spread through me, a mixture of gratitude and surprise. Compliments like that weren't new to me, but coming from him, it felt different, genuine, thoughtful, considered. I wanted to reply, to explain that I didn't always feel calm inside, that sometimes my thoughts raced and tangled, but instead I just nodded, letting him know I understood the depth of what he was trying to convey. We stepped outside into the crisp evening air. The street lamps flickered on, casting long shadows and pools of golden light on the pavement. We walked slowly, side by side, the conversation flowing in gentle, natural turns. We spoke of life, of small regrets, and the little victories that often went unnoticed. He shared memories of his childhood, his favorite spots in the city, and the books that had shaped him. I shared mine too, carefully, thoughtfully, feeling a trust that surprised me. There was a point when we paused by a small fountain, the water glittering under the lamp above. He looked at me with that same intensity, the kind that felt less like scrutiny and more like recognition. "I think people underestimate the value of just being understood," he said. "Sometimes, a conversation like this, simple, honest, it's more meaningful than a lifetime of noise." I couldn't help but smile. It was strange, how someone you barely knew could say something that resonates so completely, something that settles into your mind and refuses to leave. The fountain bubbled quietly, the air cool against our skin, and I felt a profound sense of connection, calm, steady, and unspoken yet understood. As we walked back to the cafe to say our final goodbyes, there was a pause, that subtle hesitation in both of us, the kind that exists when two people know a moment is fleeting yet significant. He extended his hand briefly, a gesture both simple and loaded with meaning, and I took it. It was an acknowledgement, a promise of sorts, that this shared understanding wasn't casual or accidental. When I finally returned home that evening, I felt a quiet thrill inside me, not the rush of excitement, but the steady warmth of being truly seen. I replayed the conversation, the laughter, the way he had made space for my thoughts without rushing or judging. It was rare to find someone who could hold such presence, and I realized that what made it memorable wasn't the words themselves, but the feeling they left behind: a sense of reflection, growth, and subtle emotional resonance. That night, as I sat by my window watching the city lights flicker, I thought about the strange unpredictability of life. The ordinary could suddenly feel extraordinary, and people who seemed peripheral could leave the deepest impressions. I understood then that some connections don't need a label or explanation, they exist simply to remind us of the quiet power of human understanding, of noticing and being noticed, in a way that changes you without demanding anything in return. The following weeks carried a quiet rhythm, the kind of days that felt ordinary on the surface but held little moments that seemed to linger longer than they should. I found myself thinking about him more often than I realized, though not in any frantic or dramatic way. It wasn't longing or obsession, it was curiosity, admiration, and the sense that our conversations had touched something deeper, a place I rarely let anyone enter. One Friday evening, my friend invited me to a small neighborhood gathering, just a few neighbors sharing drinks and snacks in someone's backyard. I hadn't expected him to be there, but the universe has its way of nudging people together. And there he was, leaning casually against a railing, the late sunlight painting his features with a soft amber glow. He noticed me immediately, and there was that same recognition in his eyes, quiet and deliberate, as though he were acknowledging a shared secret without words. I joined the group, exchanged pleasantries, laughed at anecdotes, and tried to focus on the casual conversation around me. But every now and then, our eyes met, and in those moments, the chatter faded, leaving only a subtle current of awareness, like an unspoken conversation bridging the space between us. He approached me as the gathering began to wind down, carrying a plate of snacks and a quiet confidence that made it impossible to ignore him. "You have a way of noticing things," he said, offering a small smile. "Even in the midst of a crowd, you notice the little details that others miss." I laughed softly, feeling the warmth in his words. "Maybe I just pay attention to what matters," I replied, careful to keep the tone light, though inside, my heart beat a little faster. There was honesty in our exchange, an intimacy that didn't need labels or explanations. We stepped aside into the garden, the air cool and fragrant with the scent of flowers and freshly cut grass. The sky above was a soft gradient of pinks and blues, fading into night. For a moment, neither of us spoke, letting the quiet stretch between us. It was comfortable, the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty but full of possibility. Then he spoke again, his voice gentle but steady. "I've realized something," he said. "Most people are content to skim the surface of life. But you engage with it. You see beneath the surface, and that's rare." His words hit me with an unexpected force. Rarely had anyone acknowledged the parts of me I usually kept hidden, the parts that didn't always fit neatly into daily life or polite conversation. I felt seen, truly seen, and it was both exhilarating and grounding at the same time. I wanted to respond with something meaningful, but instead, I just nodded, allowing the acknowledgement to settle between us. We talked long into the evening, about our past experiences, small regrets, dreams we didn't often share with others. His perspective was thoughtful, reflective, and somehow reassuring. I found myself revealing pieces of my life I had tucked away, not because I sought sympathy or admiration, but because he created a space where it felt safe to do so. It was rare, this kind of conversation, and I cherished every word, every pause, every glance that carried understanding. As the night grew darker and the gathering came to a natural close, we lingered near the edge of the garden. The faint glow of string lights outlined the space, casting gentle shadows and making everything feel intimate, even outdoors. He looked at me with the same unwavering focus I had come to recognize, his expression calm and unhurried. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for letting me see this side of you. It's refreshing, and more than that, it's grounding." I smiled, feeling a gentle warmth in my chest. "And thank you," I replied, "for noticing. Not many people do." We exchanged a brief, silent nod, an unspoken agreement that these moments didn't need to be explained or justified. Then, slowly, we parted ways, the night carrying us back to our separate lives, yet leaving an indelible mark. When I returned home, I sat by the window and watched the city lights blink softly against the darkened skyline. I reflected on the evenings that had passed, the conversations that had unfolded, and the quiet but profound connection that had formed. It wasn't a grand romance or a dramatic revelation, it was something subtler, deeper, a recognition of humanity, of understanding, of the rare moments when someone sees the real you and holds it gently. And in that reflection, I realized that some encounters don't need a conclusion. They exist to teach you something about yourself, about others, and about the kind of presence that leaves life richer, fuller, and infinitely more meaningful. That night, I felt a calm satisfaction, a sense that even in the ordinary, life had a way of delivering extraordinary moments. The weeks that followed were quieter, but no less significant. Life settled into its familiar rhythm: work, errands, and the small routines that often make days blur together. But beneath the surface, something had shifted within me. I found myself carrying those conversations, those moments with him, like a gentle undercurrent that reminded me how deeply meaningful human connection can be. It was a Sunday afternoon when I saw him again, though this time by chance rather than plan. I was walking through the park near my home, enjoying the crisp air and the subtle rustle of leaves as they shifted in the breeze. The sunlight dappled the paths, and the faint scent of autumn, dry leaves, cool air, and a hint of distant wood smoke made everything feel vibrant and alive. He was there, sitting on a bench with a sketchbook in hand, looking completely absorbed in his drawing. When he noticed me approaching, his face lit up with that familiar, easy smile, the one that somehow made everything else in the park fade into the background. I paused for a moment, watching him, noticing details I hadn't before: the careful tilt of his head, the focused intensity in his eyes, the way his fingers danced lightly across the paper. We greeted each other, and he gestured for me to sit beside him. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said, though his tone carried no surprise, only warmth. "It's a good surprise." We sat together, letting the quiet of the park surround us. People passed by, dogs tugged on leashes, children laughed in the distance, but there was a small bubble of calm around us. Eventually, our conversation picked up, gentle and unhurried, flowing naturally as if no time had passed at all. We spoke about our favorite parts of the city, memories we held dear, and the little discoveries that make life unexpectedly beautiful. Then he looked at me, his gaze steady and thoughtful. "I think what I value most," he said softly, "is how rare it is to find someone who truly listens, who truly sees. Not just their words, but the person beneath them. You have that, and it's remarkable." I felt a warmth spread through me that went beyond simple pleasure. It was recognition, a validation not of my accomplishments or appearance, but of who I am, my thoughts, my observations, the quiet way I engage with the world. I realized, with a subtle clarity, that this was what made our encounters so powerful. It wasn't about grand gestures or drama, it was about mutual understanding and respect, the kind that doesn't demand anything but leaves a lasting impression. We spent the afternoon sharing memories and quiet laughter, reflecting on small triumphs and the lessons we had learned over the years. There was no rush, no sense of needing to fill the space with words. Every pause felt deliberate and meaningful. In those silences, I felt a profound connection, the rare kind that doesn't need constant affirmation. It simply exists, steady and reassuring. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the park in golden and lavender hues, he stood and stretched. "I should be going," he said, though neither of us felt the need to end the moment abruptly. "But I want you to know, these conversations, these moments, they matter. More than I can express." I nodded, feeling the depth of what he meant without needing him to elaborate. "They matter to me too," I replied, my voice soft but sincere. "I'll carry them with me." We parted with a quiet handshake, a gesture that somehow felt like more than a handshake, and as I watched him walk away, I felt a calm satisfaction settle over me. It wasn't a dramatic conclusion or a storybook ending, it was the beauty of real life, the kind of connection that lingers quietly but powerfully. That evening, I sat by my window, the city lights twinkling below, and reflected on the months that had passed. Life was still full of its usual ups and downs, but something fundamental had shifted in me. I had experienced the rare gift of being truly seen, and in doing so, I had learned the value of observing, listening, and allowing others the same grace. It was a reminder that even the simplest encounters could carry profound meaning, that subtle moments of understanding could leave a lasting imprint. And in that quiet reflection, I smiled. I knew now that some people come into your life not to change it dramatically, but to remind you of the depth of human connection, the quiet joy of being noticed, and the lasting impact of mutual respect. Those afternoons, those conversations, and those steady, understanding gazes would remain with me for years to come, a gentle, enduring memory of the extraordinary power hidden in the ordinary moments of life.